Hello, guys. This is Dr. Leslie Rogers, host of Mental Health Talk. The purpose of Mental Health Talk is to create ongoing dialogue around mental health and overall well-being. How are you? Today, we have special guests, Melissa LeSane and Wayne LeSane. They are here to talk about relationships and marriage. And let me tell you guys a little bit about them, and then we'll get started. Melissa LeSane is an associated marriage and family therapist based in Los Angeles, California. Her husband, Wayne LeSane, is also working toward becoming a marriage and family therapist. Together, they work to expand ideas about intimacy and relationships, including non-monogamy. Although they target diverse population, their passion is working with people of color. Welcome, welcome. How are you guys doing?
Thanks, Leslie. We're doing good. Excited to be here. A little nervous. I'm not gonna lie.
Oh, you are? You're a little nervous?
I'm a little nervous.
It's been a while. You got this. Don't be nervous. You're a clinician yourself. You do this all the time. Well, probably not on interviews, but you do this all the time, right?
I can get nervous too.
You're right. I get nervous too being on this show. Every night I get anxious. Every time I do this. So tonight, guys, we're here. We're going to talk about non-traditional marriage in a sense. Monogamy versus polyamory, heterosexual, etc. And we're going to talk about that a little bit because, Melissa, you're a marriage and family therapist, right?
Yeah, so I am an associate marriage and family therapist. So I'm working towards my licensure. I'm really close. I got 300 hours left. I can't wait. And so, yeah, I work for a private practice, a sex therapy practice in LA County, although we don't have a set office right now, so we're all virtual right now. But I work for, like I said, a sex therapy practice, and so we see everyone that has any concerns or issues or wants support around really anything about relationships, sexuality, and sex, and then a little bit of what I'm doing on my own is coaching. Because I do have a passion for talking about, as you said, non-traditional relationships and expanding ideas about intimacy in relationships and what that can look like. And so I do a little bit of coaching and just have an online presence to just, like you said, bring awareness to fight the stigma about what relationships can look like and to talk about non-monogamy as being a viable option, not just an option, but a viable option and way to relate.
Right. That's a beautiful explanation around that. What made you go into this field?
This right here. I mean, just in general, I think I've always been kind of, I think therapy has always kind of been a calling of mine, or just helping people, emotionally has always been a calling of mine. So I kind of always knew I wanted to do something like that. But then just our experiences, our relationship, we've been together for a while, 18 years.
Wow.
And so just all of our experiences and how, and our struggles really just inspired me to be support to other people and to be inspiring to other people. And when I found out that there was such thing as therapy, when I found out that there was such thing as people like having specializations, I was like, something I can actually specialize in. This is something that is real that I can work with people with. I got really excited about that, and that's kind of how it all started. Helping his occurring. He's my biggest fan. He's been helping me in the during pandemic times, and he's just been really inspired, and I'm kind of on the same path. So,
so you talk about specialty area, sex therapy, and talk about nerves. Going into that field. What made you pick that specialty, sex therapy?
Sex therapy. Again, so just my own experiences. I think I've always just had a passion for. I feel it's really simple for talking about sex. It's really that simple. We're talking about sex and talking about sexuality, and I think that has been since I was really young the vehicle for which I have learned about myself and. I have grown, and I had some struggles and a lot of shame and a lot of confusion, and and so it's just always been a passion for me, to just kind of, do that openly now, not
Mhm.
hide, have to keep it a secret
Right.
and, and be proud of it.
Yeah. And that sounds like it can be, on that spectrum of talking about that, on that spectrum of sometimes it can be hard charging or emotional or for a lot of emotionals, a lot of emotions actually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Wayne, how are you?
I'm good.
Yeah. So where do you come in all this?
So, I was actually, I work in the entertainment industry out here now. That's what brought me out here to LA. And I was working there for years, and I just, so as Melissa said, we're going through our relationship. Sometimes, we're dealing with things within our relationship, and we really didn't have support or anybody to help us out, so we kind of felt alone. So we were dealing with a lot of things on our own, and so Melissa went out and sought the help, she needed as far as therapy goes and just self-help and stuff like that. And then I think we kind of came to a realization that, she was really good at this, and what she was already doing before I even came into the picture with her. And so I was like, man, you could really help people, seeing how she helped us and herself. And so it kind of pushed her in the direction of therapy. And so she started, to start to work with people and that kind of stuff. And so while she was going, after she finished school, and she started doing these processing groups, and I would join in and help. And just through that process of helping her with the processing groups, I started getting questions about, hey, have you ever thought about getting your license? Hey, have you ever thought about it? And I was like, no, that's not for me. That's Melissa's thing. I'm this other thing. But then after it happened a couple of times, I started to question it. And her and I talked about it. And I talked to a couple other people about it. And I was like, man, maybe there's something I can do. And I was kind of getting frustrated with the entertainment industry anyways.
Yeah.
And once I decided to do it, I was excited. And so I went back to school, in school, working towards, becoming a therapist as well. So, I know that I have a passion, because I've always wanted, even in my messages to internet, I wanted to inspire people or help people, whatever. So it's just another way of doing that for me.
Yeah. And let me tell you, your stories are inspirational, and that's why I'm glad you came onto the show. So let's get into it.
So like outside of profession, outside of, credentials and all this stuff, really, we've always had a passion together, to talk about relationships, to talk about sexuality. That is something that we bond on, one of our interests together. And we like to, in general, just inspire other people, and just have, like when I said, have these open conversations that we maybe didn't get to have in the past. We've always been passionate about it, just in our personal lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And once we start talking about it, we'll see how this topic can be stigmatized, and a lot of people don't talk about it, right? Because sometimes it's scary to talk about. So a lot of people don't talk about it in fear of being judged or ostracized, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I've gotten pretty comfortable talking about it, but sometimes I still get nervous, especially like today. Today is the platform, I haven't, like Facebook, all my family and friends are on there, and it's not as great as open, but still, it's like, it's scary. You never know.
Well, girl, everybody gonna hear it today.
Like, what is she talking about? All this talking around, like, what are we talking about today?
Right. So let's get right into it. So, okay, we're talking about, polyamorous relationships versus heterosexual, monogamous relationships. So when we talk about polyamory, how would you define that? Because I have the dictionary definition in front of me, but how would you all define polyamorous versus heterosexual?
I want to pull it back just a little bit, and so I think what I would like to offer and present is the term non-monogamy. And so polyamory is an example of non-monogamy. So let me start off with non-monogamy. Non-monogamy is basically, it describes, somebody or a practice or lifestyle or a way of being that we're open to. We have the freedom. We enjoy the freedom to, relate to people freely and openly. So that can include sexually, that can include romantically, but that we don't have to be exclusive to one person. And I use that word, and that's starts, ringing alarms and it gets scary. It's like, why? You don't have to be exclusive. Yes. And it's consensual, right? And so all of this is consensual. We're talking about consensual non-monogamy, meaning that, we have the freedom and we're open to connecting with people sexually, romantically, and all kind of other ways with more than one person at a time.
Right.
Don't feel like we have to only be sexual with one person at a time, and only be in love with one person at a time, and only be in a relationship with one person at a time. And, so that's kind of the branch. I know that was kind of all over the place. No,
but you defined it perfectly. Yeah, that's exactly it.
Well, non-monogamy is a branch. It's basically, more than one person at a time, and that's okay. And underneath that, there's different ways that people express that. It looks differently for everybody. Polyamory is one example, and it's one way. And often the term polyamory and how it's described is loving more than one person at a time. And so people who are polyamorous open themselves up to love more than one person at a time. Is sex included involved? Yes, absolutely. Can it not be? Yes, absolutely. It doesn't have to include sex. It looks different for everybody. But generally, that term polyamory, I think there's kind of an emphasis on, intimate, emotional, romantic relationships.
Yeah.
And then there's other ones. We won't go into everyone specific unless you ask me. And there's swinging, there's open relationships, there's friends with benefits.
Yeah, we're going to ask that question later, because that was one of the questions we had. But and I think one of the stigmas is when you talk about this, it's about sex, right? It's about, and when you and I talked earlier, you said it's not just about sex. So explain that.
Yeah. Okay. It's not just about sex. I mean, because it's about relationships, about connections. I like to use the word connections. It can include sex, yes, because you're human, and that's a big part of life, and so it can include sex. And I think, and not just like, oh, it can include sex, because I don't want to just water that down and minimize that. Like, I want to say that very proudly. Yes, it includes sex. That because I think we often sometimes do this thing where it's like, well, it's not just about sex. Well, it's too. But no, it's definitely about sex. Like, yes, let's put that out there. Let's give.
That's where the emotions come in at. That's where the emotions come in when you're talking about having multiple sex partners.
Yes.
That's when those party emotions come in.
I think the media, media highlights the sex, and media highlights, drama and all this stuff. But yes, the media highlights the sex act. But it's not just about sex. It's about anything, really. I mean, it really is. Like, it's about, meeting somebody and, feeling open and not feeling shame to be flirtatious with somebody. It's about having friendships and not having to end friendships with the opposite sex just because you're married now. It can look like so many different things. It's really about being open to, with people.
It looks like more than one person. Just the fact that I can care for her and I can care for somebody else, or the fact that somebody I can be accepted by more than one person. Who what we tend to do a lot of times is we try to get one person to fulfill all of our needs, which becomes now we're not. Then we put these expectations on this person and now we're disappointed because this person can't fulfill all these needs. When in all reality, one person can't fulfill all your needs. It's just not going to happen. So I can go out and get other needs filled. And those can look like anything. That could be like somebody who likes my joke. Somebody who we have the same food interest. Like we, and so forth, and whatever. So it's so many different things that it can be. And I think that people just try to hone into one thing, and it's not one thing. It's many things. Just like any other relationship.
Yeah. Priscilla says it's more so about partnership sex. It's secondary.
It's more about partnership sex. Yeah, I mean, for some people, definitely, it's more about building partnerships and establishing solid partnerships. And sex is a part of that, and sex is secondary. And sometimes sex is primary. Sometimes it does start off with sex. It may not include partnerships, or it may lead up to partnerships. And the thing, Leslie, I think we are here to talk about relationships, sexuality, connections. That's
exactly
what we want it to look like, really.
Right. And let me ask you, Is it defined in the beginning of the relationship? Do you guys talk about it in the beginning of the relationship?
I think it should be.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah,
definitely.
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
essentially, for sure. And that's the thing. I think oftentimes in relationships in general, and then this is not just with non-monogamy. This is with monogamy too. There's this assumption. We assume
Right.
that when we get together, when we're boyfriend and girlfriend, or when we're married, that we're going to be monogamous. You know, and I shouldn't be assumed. Let's talk about that. Let's put it on the table. You know,
Right.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that's often not talked about.
Exactly. A lot of times when people are dating, they're assuming that they're exclusive, but there's been no conversation, right? Because you want to have that conversation because you really don't want to have that's an uncomfortable conversation to have, right? In all reality, you need to have that conversation. You need, hey, are you only dating me? Because I always say this because when people ask about non-monogamy, right, and I make a joke, I say, the fact of the matter is that a lot more people are non-monogamous, whether they know it or not. They're in non-monogamous relationships. They just aren't spoken about. They may not know they're in a non-monogamous relationship, but they are, and it's such. And what the advantage of having that conversation, it takes away. Yes, it's uncomfortable. Yes, and it forces you to look within and deal with things that trigger you possibly. But again, though, and now you're informed, and you get to go in and make an informed decision if this is what you want or not, right? Opposed to not knowing and being surprised 6 months down the road and feeling some kind of way. You know what I mean?
Right.
So,
and I think sometimes it's assumed too, not because somebody is, yes, people can be afraid to, speak the truth on that. I think sometimes we just, a lot of people just don't know. A lot of people don't know that that's even an option, that there is something outside of being monogamous, It is like, that's, a lot of us are just brought up to just think and believe that relationships are monogamous, and when you meet somebody, you're exclusive to them, and then you get married, you fall in love, and then you get married, and you have children. It's like that with this term they call it relationship escalator. Kind of this norm of how things need to go in a relationship.
Yeah. So that's why it's so conflictual. It's so conflictual because of, and we talked about culture, right? Our cultural beliefs define early on how we're supposed to be in relationships, how we're supposed to raise families, how we're in, especially when you're talking about sexuality, right? So when you talk about culture, that's our belief system. So when we grow up, we're raised into that. And I want to say something. So I did do a little research, and Wayne, you brought this up earlier, so I'm going to read this a little bit. Non-monogamous relationships, people express their wants and needs, which not only gives them a stronger sense of self, but also helps them maintain independence. What do you think about that?
I absolutely agree. So a lot of times, a couple things to go back a little bit. I think that monogamy is our societal norm, right? That is I think that if there was like anything else, if you had choices in life, if you were given a list of choices that you can choose, I don't think that everybody would choose. I don't know if the majority of society would choose monogamy, just in how it's expressed today. Because the way monogamy looks today, it's about ownership, it's about control, and so when you're talking about, to your point about non-monogamy, I think that in the sense of I'm able to express myself, I'm able to have these conversations, more freely and talk about the things that may, like for instance, I don't want to lose a part of me. Basically, when I come to most in monogamous relationships, I have to put some parts of me away because they aren't considered relationship appropriate, right? So then people will say, "Oh yeah, you're supposed to do that before you get married, or you're supposed to get all that out your system." Like, what does that mean? I don't even understand what that means. How do you get something out of your system that is a part of you? So basically, what you do is you turn that part down. And so when people meet each other and they fall in love, they go, "Oh my God, I love you," but now they're in a relationship with you, and they say, "Oh, you seem so different." It's because they have turned parts of themselves off, so they can't show up as their full self within a relationship anymore. And I had to learn that, like for Melissa, like she is a very loving person, right? And so. And she had, and I've always said, man, I love how loving you are. But at the same time, in the beginning, when we were kind of going through, kind of figure out what non-monogamy looks like for us, some things I felt jealous of. Well, because jealousy is always,
Yeah, because I was going to bring that up later. I mean, how do you get through that jealousy?
Well, jealousy, it depends on how you manage it. It's all about managing your own emotions and feelings, right? Like you can let it consume you, or you can deal with it and figure out, why does this thing make me feel this way, right? And so, and I had to do that with her, right? And I was like, man, like, why am I feeling this way? And so then I would kind of almost try to shut her down, right? As far as caring, loving for somebody else, because the truth is, again, she's a loving person. So if I shut that part of her down, then I lose out as well. I don't get those pieces of her because she shut it down. It's just shut down over there. It shuts down everywhere, right? So but if I allow, not allow her, but if I'm saying, okay, cool, be free and be yourself, now I get all those loving parts as well.
Right.
And so, and I think that was hard for me. So I feel as though like it's about not shutting down parts of you, right? And I had to learn that. I want to be accepted fully as myself, as you want to be accepted fully as yourself. And the only way I can do that is me being honest with you and expressing the things that I think about or desire or care about or want or need. And once I give you that information, hopefully you won't weaponize it against me, and we'll have a space that's created for both of us to share spaces, feel safe. And you can let me know how you feel as well, and then we can work together and come together on, okay, cool, this works for me, and I think that is the part that is missing sometimes within monogamous relationships.
Yeah. So when you talk about mental health for you all, it sounds like it does give you a sense of self, a sense of identity as to who you all are, and you're able to be autonomous in the relationship, but you still have that partnership. But for people that haven't achieved, that as of yet, a sense of self and things of that sort, I would imagine that it's pretty difficult, especially with the ostracism and, the judgment that society or others, have on persons for not living traditional relationships. How do you get through that?
I think, well, and I'll let Melissa jump in, but I think that for what I've learned is that, first of all, I have to accept myself fully, right? I have to love myself. I have to take care of me, right? And that's hard because we all deal with shame and guilt, right? And so, but I have to accept those parts. That's who I am.
So let's wait a minute before you go on. Let's talk about that for a second. What did shame and guilt look like when you talk about that? What does that look like?
It depends, like, because of what society tells us that how we should be, or what we should do and what's normal. So when anything outside of the norm brings shame to us or guilt to us because it's not within the realm of normality, right? And that could be with anything. May it be sexual, may it be cultural, whatever, right? And so then you start to feel like, oh, something must be wrong with me because I like this thing that is not within the normal scope of things, right? Yeah. And in all reality, there's nothing wrong with me, right? It's more so, if I'm cool with me and it bothers you, then that's something that you have to deal with. It has nothing to do with me. May it be my sexual orientation, may it be the things I like. If that bothers you, that is you. That's not me, right? Mm-hmm. I'm happy with me. And so once I'm able to accept myself now, and I love myself now, when I go out into the world and look for relationships, I'm cool with me. So I can present my authentic self, and it's up to somebody to accept it, as opposed to having to live behind this veil, this mask, and present myself one way. And now I'm in this relationship, not really being myself, and find myself to be unhappy. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you guys, how does this conflict with religious beliefs, religion?
This is always a hard topic for me, a hard conversation, because if transparently, I'm not religious. I don't subscribe to any particular religion. So I think that's, I don't know. I think that is for someone to decide for themselves on how it conflicts with their religious beliefs. I think, though, the piece that I would like to put out there is that that somebody, that they do include this conversation for themselves, that they don't kind of disconnect from it and push it away. We talk about mental health. I think that's when, as Wayne mentioned, shame, guilt, when anxiety and depression starts to, impact us, is because there's these parts of us that we're pushing away because of religion, because of culture, because of whatever, and we're not really welcoming them in. And it's not to say that we have to act on them or, change our entire lives or anything like that, but it's a piece that I think that is worth reflecting on, that is worth meditating on, or having conversation, and not just avoidant, not being avoidant of it. And so I don't know. I know that there's like a podcast out there. I can't remember the name exactly, but they're Christians who are also polyamorous, and so they bring in religion and they talk about it. I think the overlap, where I would like to focus, I think the overlap is love. I think the overlap is between non-monogamy, if you want to, say non-monogamy, and religion is people, is love.
It is. The underlying thing there, the underlying thing there is love. And I think that the reason why I asked you that question is when you talk about non-tradition, and if you're talking about LGBTQ, gender identity, if you're talking about heterosexual relationships, sex before marriage, etc., anything that's non-traditional, then that's a huge conflict on religion sometimes. And then that greatly impacts mental health, right? It greatly impacts mental health.
I think even the wording alone, which it's what is available right now, but non-monogamy, as I mentioned before, something about that word that I don't quite connect with because of the non part, you know what I mean? And it's like centering monogamy and saying that this is not monogamy, this is non-monogamy, but it's not really saying what it is. I still think that there is, when even like non-traditional or things like that, I think that sort of perpetuates this outcasting or this othering or whatnot, and I think also to an extent it's necessary in the sense that I think there is value in highlighting, this isn't the norm, and then that not being the norm is okay. And maybe at some point in life we will get to where we don't even have to specify these ways, and we just say relationships, and people know that can look like whatever whatever you want it to be.
So let me take a viewer question really quickly. What's the difference between non-monogamous relationships and swingers?
Non-monogamous relationships. So I think, or I thought I had mentioned it earlier, maybe. So swinging. So we talked a little bit about polyamory and how that is said to be, centered around relationships and connections and emotional intimacy. And swinging is said to, be centered around sex often, or sexual relationships and sexual connections. But I say that very lightly, that's kind of like, if we're going to describe it in kind of a very basic way, pretty much often it's said that like the focus here is often sex and the focus here is often relationships, right?
So there's that emotional piece. So with
but that's the thing. It's like
with swingers, are you saying that with swingers there's not that emotional? Are you saying that with swingers the goal is sex, is not that emotional piece? But is it on the extreme? On
the most basic level, that's how people receive that. Yes, but we're emotional beings, and so I like to look at everything as more of a spectrum. You know what I mean? Because it swingers that doesn't. Yes, there usually is kind of this this common interest, of sex, right? It's like we want to have sex, we want to be, open about that and empowered to, to connect openly about sex and not be ashamed about it, right? But that doesn't mean that there's no emotions involved and you can never have any emotions. No. In swinging, there are relationships and there are friendships, and it looks different. The thing with polyamory, like to say, oh, it's all about relationships, all about partnerships, all about intimacy, it's like, yeah, it is. And sex is too. There is a part, for that as well. So,
and I think that in both cases, both are fighting for the same sort of space in the sense of wanting to be liberated and be freer and be themselves, and and so in all actuality, it's more together than they are apart. Because in just like anything, like we have so many subgroups in this country, subgroups and sub whatever, right? We got ethnicity, religion, and all those kind of things. But in all honesty, like it's I want eventually you want to hope that it doesn't have to be, the ethnicity doesn't have to be mentioned, the religion doesn't have to be mentioned, the sexual orientation doesn't have to be mentioned, you know, the relationship status doesn't have to be mentioned because it's so normal, you know. And so I believe that we would love to help, just by speaking about these things, would love to try to help normalize a lot of relationships, different types of relationships, different styles of relationships, because the more we normalize it, the more there are people that are able to come out and be like, hey, look, this is the type of relationship I want.
Because you're validating it too. You're validating the experiences as well. So you're normalizing it and you're validating it from your experiences, you know, of acceptance, especially. Another viewer question, guys, why marry? Why get married if, and I think that's an excellent question. Why get married if you want to have extramarital relationships?
That's a good question. I really like that question because I wish I would have asked myself that question more deeply when I got married. Not to say that I regret it, because I don't. But I think that's, again, another personal. Everybody has a different reason for why they're married. I can speak for myself. Why did we get married? I think at the time that we decided to get married, we felt like that was a way for our relationship to be validated, you know, for people to see us and for people to take us seriously, and to be validated, I think really is what it was. And also, I think we went with this, again, I mentioned the relationship escalator, you know, I was very much connected to that concept back then, not necessarily consciously, but that like, oh, okay, I met somebody, and I'm feeling great with him. I'm now in love with him. Oh, the next step is marriage. Obviously, the next step is marriage. Let's get married, right? And then the next step is going to be having children together. And so I think that's just kind of what that was the natural progression of the relationship at the time. And of course, there's financial benefits, which we talked about. You know, there just are privileges and benefits for financially, you know, for being married.
Absolutely.
And so, but even though that was considered, I can't say that was like my top reasons for getting married. Honestly, I think it was just to feel validated.
Exactly.
And because between us, validated from other people, because between us, from day one, we had always felt like really connected. We didn't feel like we needed that extra validation just for us.
Right.
But then also there was a conflict because it was like, ooh, what about other people? They feel about it. So today, aside from like the financial benefits, I don't think I would have had to get married. Like, I don't think it would have been necessary for us to get married.
Yeah.
That's my part on it.
Yeah. Have the openness in the relationship made the marriage stronger, with that openness and the open communication and with the openness, have it made the relationship stronger?
I don't think it's necessarily the openness more so than it is the communication aspect of to communicate about the openness is definitely help, you know, because it just brings us closer together. Because like I tell people that, man, we've had some of probably the most uncomfortable conversations that people probably couldn't even believe that we've had, you know, like between one another, like just the things that we said to one another and talked and brought up, not said in a negative way, but just brought up to one another. You know, maybe there's something that I'm interested in, and now I have to relay that to her, and maybe I feel uncomfortable, but regardless, I have to do it because in order for us to move forward, you know. And what we learned that being in an uncomfortable space allows for a lot of growth, right? So if we're not uncomfortable, then we're not growing, right? You know, the uncomfortableness has to come in for us to grow. So I believe that it's allowed us a lot of growth and a lot of closeness, you know, through the conversations that we've had.
And it's also really challenged us.
I can imagine.
It's the growth comes after the challenge. You know what I mean? The insight comes in hindsight. Like all of the growth that we have gone through has been because of the obstacles we've gone through, a lot of the challenges that we've gone through. You know, I think we don't talk enough about, you know, things like how to dance and how do you say it? How to maintain autonomy and individuality within a relationship, right? We don't talk enough about sex in long-term marriages and relationships, and how that changes, and how it's not like, oh, it should be
Right.
like, no, some relationships are sexless marriages and relationships. We don't talk about how having kids and postpartum depression impacts sex and relationships.
Mm-hmm.
All these different things, which is a lot of the challenges that we've gone through.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And that's not even including other people. But
Mm.
yeah, I think that what I like about non-monogamy, the communities of non-monogamy, the spaces of non-monogamy, the concepts and the research and the theories about non-monogamy is there's an emphasis on openness. There's an emphasis, not just, again, the openness, not to just engage with other people, but the openness to be open with ourselves, to be open with our partners or the people in our lives, and to be open about our struggles, and to be open about our desires and our pleasures. So, that's what I really want to emphasize.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I know that I was talking to a colleague of mine the other day, and we were talking about this segment that I was having tonight. And we were talking about, if we could have our partners, be open with us about their needs. And I was like, oh, I don't know, because I'm a jealous person.
Exactly.
But, so I'm sitting here listening to you all talk, like, it can be a bit of a struggle, but that's like how I asked, I think that the key is to communicate your needs in the beginning, and to have open discussions about what your needs are and what your wants are, instead of waiting, 2-3 years down the line. And then, talking about things of that sort. And,
but don't we promote that already in relationships? And I think when it comes to sex,
mm-hmm.
somehow it's different. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing that, again, the space.
Because it's a hard discussion. Like you said, it's a hard discussion to accept.
Yeah, the concepts, of theories, and the spaces and communities of non-monogamous, that are non-monogamous, again, really embrace that, really emphasize that, and really welcome that like, we're not going to shy away from conversations about sex. We're not going to shy away from, conversations about, our needs, our
desires,
intimate, things like that. Yeah. But it's already a part of relationships, right? Because I don't know, say one partner wants to stay in LA and another partner wants to move. I mean, that's a hard conversation.
Mm-hmm.
When you meet somebody and you've maybe been dating for a while, or maybe you've had a divorce in the past, and you're looking, to get, maybe that was a bad example. I'm trying to give an example. You want to get married, essentially. Yeah. You put that on the table and you say, I want to get married eventually. I want to have a family. This is what I'm looking for. We're already doing that. But I think sometimes somehow it falls short when it comes to sex.
Because that struggle, Melissa, is the traditional look, the traditional idea of marriage, relationships, etc. Right? It's the traditional idea, and that, to think outside of that, we're rational beings. If we don't understand something, we rationalize about it. And sometimes we come up with rationales that are maybe inaccurate assumptions. And
you get irrational thoughts. Yeah,
right.
Well, so our sex education, or I want to say that it's hopefully trying to get better, but like, there's this idea that if we talk about it, our kids are gonna want to do it, and they're gonna go wild and they go crazy, and that's what we're trying to push back on. It's like, no, I think if we talk about it, it doesn't always necessarily mean that it has to happen. We're going to make moves and all this stuff. I think just being able to have the space to openly talk about these things, to openly, accept things about ourselves and feel supported and feel understood, and still feel loved. And that, I think, is that is what I know. We start to feel fulfilled. We start to feel seen and understood, and not that now we're just wild and crazy or whatnot. I think the wild and crazy and oh my gosh, and the things that we hear is because we're not talking about it, we're not being open about it. So then now
Yeah.
it's just going to happen, or we're going to think and do it, or things like that.
Yeah. So creating that space inside your home and inside your relationship to have discussions. And a lot of times we can say that now and create that space, but again, we reject that communication when it's presented to us. We reject it, right? Because of how, so then it becomes a conflict, right? So being able to think about how you feel about a certain thing, such as this, non-monogamous relationships, how you define it and how you think about it, and then how your partner thinks about it as well. And sometimes it takes you to have to step back and kind of think about it yourself instead of responding impulsively.
Exactly. And I think that's a good start for anybody, you know. Just talking about relationships in general can sometimes feel overwhelming.
Yeah.
But just taking that moment to reflect with yourself, to be reflective with yourself and say, what is it that I really want? Are there parts of me that I am pushing away, disconnecting from, that I'm not being honest with myself about? You know, that's, I think, a great place to start, because the more that you're aware of yourself and you can accept yourself, the more that you can, you know, be empathetic towards other people, have understanding for and accept other people. And then the more that we can now work together and start to break, and start to create, and start to, you know.
Yeah. Now, Melissa, do you find that a lot of persons are starting to practice non-traditional relationships?
Yes, I do. Did you want to add something before I go?
Yeah, I wanted to say that a lot of our decisions are based out of fear, right? Right. When it comes to us, we're open to things like for my like when it comes to yourself, like you're open to, you have all kind of things that are possibilities that you can do within your head, and open when it comes to your partner. You're like, nah, because of fear, right? You fear of loss of time, fear of this person not wanting to be with you anymore because they may find somebody more interesting or whatever. You know, so it's all fear based, right? And the reality is that if I'm me and I continue to be me and do me, right, then there should be nothing that I fear about my partner leaving me, because I'm still being my authentic self, who my partner fell in love with.
That's something you had to work up to.
Oh, definitely. You know, for sure. That's that self-love, you know, and self-confidence. So now I love myself enough to know that I am worthy, and I'm confident enough to know that I'm doing what I was doing from the beginning. So I know that she loves me and is not going to, you know, go anywhere. Even if she were to meet somebody else or fall in love with somebody else, that doesn't take anything away from me, right? Because if anything, we'll have a conversation to negotiate time, right? And I'm not losing anything, because really the truth is like okay, cool. Let's say two people, they talk about quality time. They spend a lot of time with each other. But how is that time spent? One person's on the computer, another person on the phone, one person watching television, one person's upstairs, one person's downstairs. It's not really so. But the fact that, okay, cool, we're not really doing anything. But if you're out the house with somebody else, and now I need you to be doing this thing with me, and it's a fear. It's out of the fear. You know?
Right.
Just I want to validate, you know, that the fear, you know, valid. The fear, so I don't want to dismiss that part. Like we all have, you know, it's not to say that, oh, it's bad that you're making decisions out of fear. We all do it, and it's valid. Our fears are valid, but it's just taking an extra step to like, what is it that I'm really afraid of? What, you know, what is actually can happen, and what is it just me, you know, making up stories in my head or whatever. So anyway,
so I love the question. I love the question that's up, right? And so I believe that men should be open to women wanting and getting the same thing that a man is getting. I believe that you know, women have been oppressed, you know, in many different ways, and hence, you know, women slut shame each other because the system has slut shamed women for so long that the system don't even have to do it anymore, because women do it towards each other now, right? And women can't even express themselves sexually because, and it's not that women aren't sexual beings. I'm not here to speak for women, but you know, it's not that women aren't sexual beings. You know, we're all sexual beings. It's not that they don't desire sex or desire certain types of sex, but because of the shame that comes with it, that you know, they aren't allowed to express themselves the same way. And so hence,
but I think that there's a different look, you know, there's a different the word that comes to mind is that there's a perception about women than it is for men, you know, especially when you talk about multiple partners, right?
and it's again, it's an unfair perception. You know, it's not fair. It was created. It was created again. You know, I don't really want to get into it, but it was created. It's a tool of controlling women's sexuality, so that men can feel more confident and stroke their own egos and also and all that. You know, we get into toxic masculinity and all the sort of things and misogyny and you know, we understand all that, right?
But
so,
here you're talking about everybody's consenting. You know, you guys are consenting. So yeah,
exactly.
outside of that.
The question more specifically, because you were talking about polyamory, and again, like that really depends on your dynamic, you know, and everybody's polyamorous dynamic is the same. So yeah, it is accepted both ways. There is, you know, in polyamorous relationships, and sometimes there are people who don't like, and that's let me, you know, tell the truth about it. You know, not everybody is like all, you know, we're human beings, and so we're not. What's the word? We're not. I can't think of the word, but yes. So sometimes in some dynamics with some people, you know, it's not accepted, and there are dynamics where it's like closed off, where you know it's men and his pleasure and whatnot, and women, you know, are not allowed to, or they don't want to, or it's not open to. There's no, you know, whatever judgment on that, if that's the dynamic that everybody consents to and they choose. But yes, it can't. It is both ways.
Right, but now we're talking about different types of polyamorous relationships because there's several different kinds with different names.
Yeah.
I know this is like do we need to do a part 2? This is like you can go on and on about this topic. And because I mean, again, when you talk about non-traditional behaviors, you know, there's a lot to say. You know, there's a lot to say about it.
You asked the question too about do I think that more people are?
Have you seen that? Like, have you seen a growth, and especially in your field?
Wayne is always passionate about this question, so I'm going to say peace and let him talk. But I feel like it's nothing new. I feel like it's always been here. This is non-monogamy is nothing new. You know what I mean? I think that we're just, you know, talking about it more, and we're interested in more and things like that. But it's always been here, and it hasn't always been consensual. You know, there's definitely has, and it hasn't always been consensual. Like Wayne mentioned earlier, there's a lot of people in non-monogamous relationships, they don't even know it because it's not consensual, right? And so it's cheating. Now it's cheating. Now you know, there's infidelity, things like that. And so again, why not just put it out on the table? You know, just talk about it.
What is that word? What's that F word you said earlier, Wayne? Why not? She said, why not put it all out on the table? What's that F word you said earlier? Fear.
Fear. Oh, I was like,
fear. Fear. Because again, you put it all out on the table, you know, the fear of rejection or the fear of, you know, being judged or ostracized or, you know, so it's hard. It's difficult to have these conversations, especially if the two of you aren't on the same page.
Right. So two things. One, so when I first met Melissa, I knew I was already feeling like when I met her 18 years ago, I was already feeling like I don't know if I can do a monogamous relationship. I can sustain it. It's sustainable maybe about a year, maybe 2, whatever. But I know past that, I don't really know. So I really wanted to be with her. This is off the first This is one of the very first conversations we had, maybe the second or third conversation we had. I knew I wanted to be with her, but at the same time, I needed to say some things to her that I feared that she may not accept me because when I say these things, I remember saying to her that I didn't know if monogamy was natural. I didn't know if I could be in a monogamous relationship, you know. So in saying those things, she could have been like, okay, cool, I feel you, appreciate you, enjoy your life. But she accepted me, you know, when I told her that. But it was a huge fear of mine. I was like, man, I'm about to be really honest with this person, knowing that she may not accept me and I may lose out. And that's the thing. I could possibly lose out on this person I want to be with, but in the long run, we wouldn't work out anyways if she was not open to those things because I would have cheated or whatever the case may be. You know what I mean? And as far as like the population growth, I think that when she first went to school, we talked about her. This is like 8 years ago. I was talking about if she goes to school and by the time she's done, because she can be on a precipice of this shift in society of how relationships are viewed. And now what you see is you see it in social media, you see it television and advertisements. You see this whole shift in relationships dynamics. Like for instance, like they did a study, it was a couple years ago, where I think like 20 million people had admitted to being in non-traditional relationships, right? It seems like a lot to people, but again, there's 300 and some million people in this country, so it's really not a lot. But there's a lot when you think about over 20 million who admitted it. That's not the people. That's not the people who had admitted. And then on top of that, like Massachusetts was the first state to legalize, I think, gay marriage, right? And so now they're recognizing more than two people in a relationship, right? So again, now laws are starting to shift with the growth of the change of the dynamics of relationships, right? Because now if you're recognizing 3 or 4 people in a relationship, that lets you know that there must be a significant amount of people to be doing this in order for there to have to be a shift in how we view relationships.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And according to Melissa, a lot of people are talking about it now, so are coming out. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she wouldn't have clients, they wouldn't have clients if this wasn't a thing that was
right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So let me ask a couple more questions and then we'll wind down. So how do you communicate this to family and children? You guys have 3 children, right?
4.
4.
Yeah.
How do you communicate your relationship?
So for me, I'm all about honesty with the kids and having honest, open.
We both are.
Yes. We're both about having open, honest conversations with the kids about our relationship and just relationships.
About anything, really.
Yeah, about everything, and so I think that it allows our kids to make informed decisions, and they get to go out and they see that there's many different options and possibilities, and so they're very in tune with themselves, and anybody who speaks to them can see that they
are they inquisitive?
Very much so. Yeah,
do they ask questions?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, I think the thing I like to share this idea that I think the conversation about us, about our relationship, started way before the conversation about us and our relationship, right? It was really intertwined in just how we guide our kids in life and how we parent. Like I said, we're very open about talking with them about everything and anything, and sex in general, relationship in general. And so it really started with exposing them to and talking about and being around, people with different types of relationships and in different dynamics. And so it doesn't have to be like this whole unveiling because
absolutely
because we've already been talking about it since day one, since we have friends and us and we have friends over and we're very affectionate with each other, and it's not about it isn't very appropriate, like it's not such a taboo in general with our kids. And so then finally when we did share, we just kind of used our judgment and felt like, okay, maybe this is a good time, maybe this is the right time to tell them about us, because at first, even though we did start off very openly, we still were dealing with a lot of inner conflict. Is this something that we should keep private or not? And so we just kind of shared with them, and we're like, what do you think about this? We would just ask them questions like, what do you think about somebody loving 2 people? And we let them answer, and and based on their answers we kind of fill it out. And what do you think about mom having another boyfriend? And we would just kind of throw things out there and just open up conversation. And then I don't know, and then eventually we just use a lot of humor and share.
But I think that whenever you have those non-traditional, again, when we talk about non-traditional behaviors, those routines that go against societal norms, and then you have to have those discussions, right?
If we normalize it from day one, it doesn't have to be this huge, scary, unveiling conversation.
Right. And at the same time, I know, because when you start talking about kids, people start to wonder, like, what are kids' age? Our kids range from ages 15 to 5. And my oldest son, who came to live with us when he was 11, he's 28. So, we've spoken to all the way from the 28-year-old to the 5-year-old, to have conversations. Right. And in the same way, like I wasn't worried about being kicked out of the family or anything like that, because, for me, I'm gonna live my life, and whatever makes me happy, and I'm sorry if you don't accept it. You know, that has nothing to do with me. That's and so letting family know was kind of like they know. You know, I'm kind of more so. Loving and I try to bring good energy. So the way I'm give it to them is going to be more in a humorous way, possibly fun kind of way, you know. And so I didn't fear that they would not accept me, you know. It was and once you know in the space at first. Now what I did have an issue with was my work. So I was worried about how I could be viewed if the entertainment industry, if these things got. But then I was like, you know what? I don't even care. It doesn't matter because
a lot of folks in the entertainment industry is non-traditionalists.
But no one is open about it though.
Right.
So they're worried about, again, not being able to be employed. You might get kicked off the show.
Right.
You know, or you might not be able to release an album, you know what I'm saying? All these type of things. So but because of what she does, you know, and what her therapy, you know, the area is in, she put out a statement, and when she did, I was like, yeah, I'm good. Like let's so we can announce to everybody at the same time. And now, if anybody has any questions, they can ask then. And if not, it's cool. You know, so.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say, you know, being able to talk about it, I think that helps you to achieve acceptance and helped you to achieve, you know, a self-identity that makes you feel comfortable and not, you know, anxious. It reduces anxiety, I would imagine, a lot, because now you're free, you're open, you're free, and you know, you can talk about, like you said earlier, you know, it's about me. And if others don't, you know, agree with it, that's okay, because it's about how I feel about myself, right? So as we wind down, oh my gosh, guys, thank you so much for coming on here, you know, self-disclosing and talking about your relationship. And again, talking about intimacy, marriage, and mental health, and how, you know, living a polyamorous relationship or non-monogamous marriage it can be impacted by mental health. We talk about how you potentially be judged, to be ostracized, and how you feel that other people are going to think about you. Oftentimes we always think about that. How are they going to feel about us, right? And that guides behaviors and thoughts and emotions on how others think about us, as opposed to how we think about ourselves, right? But then once we get, you know, once we are okay and comfortable within ourselves with who we are, what other people think doesn't matter.
And you know, so funny you say that, because and not to go up, not change subject, but that affects so many parts of us in so many ways. Like
it does.
Because, like for instance, like we're out and about in the store and our kid is loud, because we get embarrassed, you know, because everybody else is looking at us a certain way. Now we want to discipline our child because we're embarrassed, because we feel judged by people, when in all reality our child is being a child, and it has nothing, you know. And so, why do we give people so much power over ourselves, right? To affect our lives in so many ways, when in all honesty, at the end of the day, you are ultimately the person who are going to make you happy, you know. And with your happiness, you got to be okay with that and accept that in all ways of life, you know.
Absolutely. Yep. You are the one who can make yourself happy, right?
Yeah.
Right. So any final words before we end, Melissa?
I really want to emphasize that my message here is not monogamy versus non-monogamy. My message here is not about, you know, recruiting and trying to change people and, you know, over to non-monogamous relationships. And it's not about shaming or judging or you know, what's the D word? I can't think of the D word. But like, it's not about devaluing monogamy, because I'm all about love in general, right? So this really is the message that I want to emphasize. It's just that relationships can look like whatever you want them to look like. Like, let that be your decision. You know, that can come from you. And if that is non-monogamy, beautiful. If that is monogamy, beautiful. You know, choose that, be intentional in that, and show up for yourself in your relationship, and show up for the relationship in a way that feels good to you.
Excellent. Relationships are defined. I guarantee everyone on this platform defines relationship differently.
Yes.
Right. Wayne, any final words?
Yeah, for me, it's more so just to help try to normalize different types of relationships, to bring voices to people who don't have voices, who are afraid to live their most authentic life or authentic self, to have fear about coming out and saying, hey, look, I like this type of relationship, So and if I can, help inspire one person, two people to come out and be like, hey, you know what? Yeah, I want to live my life to its fullest in the way that I want to live my life. And that's what I'm here to do.
Well, with that said, I just want to add that as a therapist, I think it's important that I say this, that at when I was in therapy, I wasn't, our relationship was still very discreet. I didn't share that in therapy. I didn't share that with my therapist. And I felt like I think that was a disservice to myself, and to therapy. And so I do really want to encourage people that, if this is something that feels important to you, if you are in a non-monogamous relationship or you're curious about it, that there are therapists out there that you can talk to. It might take a little bit of research and interviewing therapists. But if, it's not something that you have to leave out of therapy. And because how can you work on yourself when you're like leaving these parts out? That is so. So if anybody, needs some guidance on that, please reach out to me and I can share some resources and, some tips on how to find somebody that you can bring this up with.
Yeah. And I like that because we do, we can't process through certain things ourselves. Sometimes we need the aid of someone on the outside to help us process through feelings. That's why we don't disclose in therapy because we feel ashamed and guilt and all those emotions ourselves, right? So we don't want to be judged, but we're our biggest judger.
Yes.
We're our biggest judger. We're judging ourselves before somebody else judges us. So then guess what we think? Since we're judging ourselves, then you're judging me too, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So that's a perfect way to end. Thank you so much to LeSanes, Melissa LeSane and Wayne LeSane for coming on to Mental Health Talk to talk about non-traditional relationships, specifically non-monogamous relationships, and how you guys have worked through and have gained a sense of self and a sense of awareness, identity to help your relationship grow stronger, right? And hopefully you guys have gotten a lot from this segment. And oh my gosh, we went over an hour, so this was some good stuff.
Yes. And there's more. Like we barely scratched the surface of it. And
we might have to do a part two.
Our story. If you follow. I was gonna say follow me. I do share. I share on my Instagram shades.
Well, give me your information and I'll post it.
Okay, cool.
So funny, every platform that either she's been on by herself or we've been on, it always goes over because there's so much to unpack and so much to talk about. Things that we don't really talk about. So when you talk about it, you're like, oh my God, I have so many questions, because there's so many things that I would love to know. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So absolutely. So we got to get you guys back on here. But absolutely, this is Dr. Rogers with Mental Health Talk. Thank you guys for coming and tuning in. And until next time, peace and blessings.